Alright, in this video tutorial I'm going to talk about how to create a simple eye rig using what I call the Drawbridge technique. I'll also create another video you can look out for a more complicated eye rig. And so for this example, this is a case where your eye might look something like this, where you have your iris and then you have, just one simple eyelash that's going behind it. And then, maybe your head is, let me just switch this. And maybe your head, looks something like that in the background. Okay, so to set this up, I went ahead and got started. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 vector drawing layers, and I'm still kind of constructing it right now. But let's see here. To catch up, I have the back of the head right there. I have a pupil. I have just like a simple eyelash. And then I'm going to show you how I'm going to create an eyelid to go on the top that'll kind of work as the drawbridge, as it were. So I'm going to take this eyelash, and the way that I drew this eyelash is I used the line tool, and I used a thicker pencil. And with the line tool, you can just click and drag, and then hold down hold down Command, and bend the line like that. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that eyelash. I'm going to press Command or Control C to copy, go up to the eyelid, turn that on, and then Control V to paste. And then next up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a pencil that, use the color that's going to match the back of the head. And then with the line tool, I'm going to have the line tool selected, and then with the line tool selected, something I like to do is just make sure this magnet is turned on under tool properties, and that'll allow you to snap to things here. And let me make sure the right color is selected. And essentially what I'm trying to do is create the eyelid. So I'm just going to draw out the eyelid here like that. So I have a line version of that. And with that eyelid, I'm just going to select the whole thing using the select tool at the top left. So select the whole thing just by drawing a lasso around it. And then I'm going to copy the line art down to the color art. So this button, copy line art down to color art. Then under the color art, I'll paint bucket it in. And then finally, as one last step, is I'll go back to the select tool, go up to the line art, and just delete the line art outside of it. And so now I should have the eyelash and then the eyelid. And last thing I need to do is I just need to switch the order so the eyelash goes on top of the eyelid. Oops. Like that. And we're set up. And so the basic idea here is that if the character needs to close their eyes, we'll select both of these layers and drag it down to mask out the eye, just like that. All right, so just press edit and do a few times to break this out. So again, just looking at this, the layers that I have to set up. So I have the head, the rest of your character's head. I have the pupil on a layer. I have the eyelid on a layer. And then finally I have an eyelash on a layer. And so now let's go over to the node view. And so you can find the node view by just finding the panel you want, look for it. But if you don't see it, you can look for the panel you want it to go on. And then just hold down plus and go down to node view right there and pull it up. And I'm going to enable all my layers. So I just do that by dragging and selecting. You can press A to enable, D to disable, or you can turn on the eyes over here under the timeline to get this all set up. And I'm gonna press with the head. I'll just disable that just so that we don't have to look at that right away. All right, so let's start rigging this up. So I have the pupil. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a peg to that. And before that I do that, I'm just going to reorder these so that lines up. Remember, on this composite node, if you want something to go appear on top of something else, you just drag and select it and it'll show up on top. So just to demonstrate that real quick, I'll bring the head back on by pressing A. And if I just take this node and I drag it to the left, it'll go over top of everything else. If I drag it to the right, it'll go behind. So let me just disable that again. All right, so first thing up, I'm going to select the pupil, and I'm going to add a peg to that. So just with the pupil selected, I'm going to press Command on a Mac, Control on a PC, and then P as in peg, and that creates it so that it's automatically lined up. Whenever I create a peg, I click on this yellow properties box and switch it to separate rather than 3D path. And next I need to just line up the peg. So to line up the peg, I make sure it's selected over here. Then you're looking at the top of your toolbar and your interface, and you're looking for this button with the circular arrow going around it. And so this tool, if you click in the middle, you can change the anchor point of the peg. If you click out here, you can rotate the peg. And remember, the pegs work as a parenting system, so if I were to rotate the peg, it would rotate the drawing underneath. So just to demonstrate that, I'm going to move the anchor point, and now when I rotate, it rotates from that point. And for the peg, I just want it to go right in the middle of the eye. And remember, when it comes time to animate, you're going to want your animation to be on the pegs and never on the drawings. So keep that in mind. And then finally, with the peg selected, it's good to have this button turned on. So that's the peg selection mode. And so that's under Tool Properties. So again, with the peg selected, look under Tool Properties and look for this button to enable it. All right, so we're set up with the first peg. Next up, I'm going to take the eyelid, the eyelash, and so that's this layer that's right there, and I'm going to add a deformer on it. So if you're unfamiliar with deformers, you can look back at my deformer video. Let's see here. So I have the eyelash selected, and to add a deformer to this, I'm going to click on this wrench icon at the top. It's called the rigging tool. So I'll click right there, and I'm going to use the this tool, the envelope mode, and with this, I'm just going to click, and then here I'm going to drag to the left, and then let go. So I'm kind of dragging towards the line that I want to create, and then I'm going to add an anchor point at the end. I'm going to drag back towards the rest of the line. So if I click and then drag back towards the rest of the line, if I drag this way, you can see it overlaps on top of itself a little bit. Something that's nice about the rigging tool is as long as you're in rigging mode, you can adjust the position of things without it affecting your drawing. So we can just kind of fine tune this a little bit and get that exactly where you want it to go. And from here, I'm going to turn animate current frame off. So this in this toolbar with a little yellow stick figure, I'm going to turn that to red. When it's yellow, whenever I move this, it's going to generate a keyframe, and I don't want keyframes right now. So I'm just going to turn that off. And then whenever you want to move a deformer or animate your rig, you're going to use this transform tool. And you can see it's now moving the eyelash, but it's not moving the eyelid on top of it. So to have this affect the eyelid, what I can do is just click and drag the eyelid and then attach that as well to the deformer. So you can attach multiple drawing objects to the same deformer. And so with this deformer selected, I can now, with that transform tool, move it, and the whole eyelid moves with it here. And I like to the reason I have those on two different drawing layers is it just gives me like a little bit more control over things. And you can see it gets like a little crumply and weird up there. But remember, if I enable the head by clicking on it and pressing A, or turning on the visibility on down here, and then click off of it, the drawbridge method kind of works in terms of using the eyelid to mask off the pupil. So I can either press Control Z to reset this, or you can look for this button at the top, and so that resets the current keyframe, and so that'll reset the deformer right there. There could be an argument for adding pegs in here, but I think I'm okay without it at this point. And what I'm going to do now is on top of this deformer, and so this is really important, so I have the deformer and I can move it around this way, but you might want to just take this whole object and move it up and down. So we're going to on top of the deformer. So with this deformer selected, I'm going to press Command or Control and then P to add a peg on top of that. And then same as we were doing before, is I'm going to click on this yellow properties box on the new peg, switch it from 3D path to separate, and close that out. And so now I have that peg. And to create a peg, you want to go through that step, and then you also want to change its anchor point. So remember that's this button up here. And it just kind of depends where you want it to go. I'm going to have the anchor point. Let's just pretend this is their eye on screen, right? So I guess that would be their left eye. So I might put the anchor point, somewhere in this range over here. And so now if I want to animate this eye, I can either animate the pupil by clicking on this peg. Again, go down to the transform tool, wait for the 4 arrows to show up. If you don't get 4 arrows, you're going to click off of it. So you can move the pupil, or sorry, the pupil that way. I can scale it, hold shift if you want it to be uniform. And so I can change the proportion right there. Remember when you have a peg selected, it'll highlight this color. So remember this is a black color. And then if I click on the pupil, it'll highlight this, the drawing layer, it'll highlight purple. So if it's showing up purple, that means you clicked on the drawing. And then if it has more of a yellowish, warmer color, then that means you're working correctly and you're working on the peg. And so I have that area of manipulation I can do. I have this deformer right here where I can really bend my eyelash in these multiple ways to create multiple expressions right here. And then finally I have the peg for the eyelash where again wait for those 4 arrows where I can narrow the eyes or move them up and down right there. So decent amount of control happening. And so let's finish this thing off. And so over here, we'll just want to have one more peg that kind of unifies everything. So kind of like a primary peg on top. And so remember, you can create one peg and parent multiple pegs to it. So I can just drag and select both of those, press Command or Control and P, and then that creates a peg for your whole eye system right here. Remember, there's a yellow properties box separate. You can call this, I'll call this front eye. Okay, and so now with that peg, we can just move the whole thing around if need be right here. And, the head you'll kind of typically keep separate from the rest of this. And one thing to remember too is your rig, this is something I like to do, is I like to create multiple composite nodes so that I can kind of organize this a little bit better. So you could stop right here, or you can click in this empty area, press return, type in composite. And instead of these being plugged into the main composite, you can just, again, I'll just do these cutters right here. Put the composite back down here. Snap that in right there. And then finally just plug it back in. And so the reason you might do this is as you start to build out a head, even if it's a simple rig, I feel like this bottom composite node can start to get really crowded down there and hard to manage. And so by creating multiple nodes, you can just have like one eye set to this composite. I'm going to show you, I have another video tutorial that shows you how to duplicate this and flip it for your other eye. And so it enables you to just kind of have these sectioned off into individual areas and make your node view easier to navigate.